Joining us now, Nick Freitas, House of Delegates member. Nick, you know a little bit about border crossings illegally, walls. You were at Green Beret. We're live here in Sunland Park, New Mexico. Nick, great to have you with us, man.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Nick, you got to see this to believe it. You really do. I tell you what, Chris Kobach said something yesterday to me that I got up thinking about it. He said, the federal government can't get their act together. They can't build this wall. So we have to go to private funding to do it. And once again, American entrepreneurism, ingenuity, creativity, and spirit got it done where the federal government failed totally. And we got to stop looking to the federal government to get things done and do it ourselves. Quite the message, Nick Freitas. What do you think of this whole thing?
Well, no, I think it's great. I mean, I've said for a long time that if you want something done, ahead of schedule and under budget, you don't ask the federal government to do it. Now, that doesn't take away from the federal government's responsibility in order to secure our borders, but I think it's great when private citizens realize that they don't have to wait around for politicians to get their act together, that you can talk to people that own property on the border, and then you can act yourselves in order to make a difference, and I think that's great.
The situation here at the border is so terrible, the crisis that the president's been talking about. But one thing that, Nick, the people don't realize, and I just want to get your take on it here a little bit, is we're at the property right now of a company called American Brick Eagle, who gave the land to WeBuildAWall.us to put it up, went through the zoning processes. And I talked to the owner last night. They were going out of bankruptcy. This guy was ready to file bankruptcy and shut his business down and put 500 workers out on the street because these cartels were overrunning his border, illegals, drug smugglers, traffickers, human traffickers. They would steal construction equipment. He couldn't hire enough security. And then even if they had security there, like what were they going to do with them? There were too many of them. And so they were going out of business. And I talked to another rancher that's part of this who said the same thing. They would come in, steal their cattle. I mean, it's amazing what has been going on, and the federal government powerless to do anything until this private organization came in. By the way, Nick, every inch of this wall built with private donations. What do you think of that?
John, it wasn't that long ago. I was actually working. I had gotten out of the military, and I was doing some analysis for U.S. law enforcement, and one of the things that we were looking at was border security, and we weren't just looking at it from the perspective of how it affected Americans. We were looking at it from the perspective for how it affected people that were attempting to cross the border. And what we found was that the cartels had largely taken over the kind of the job of smuggling people across the border, and they would murder immigrants that tried to come across the border that weren't going through the processes that they had set up. And so I think one of the most important things to understand about the entire crisis at the border is that what Republicans are looking for, we don't have a problem with people trying to come to the country. We love it when people want to come to the country legally, when they want to become Americans. I think some of the most patriotic people you will ever meet are people that are fleeing other countries, especially socialist countries, in order to try to come to a place that actually respects their individual liberty and respects their right to be able to work hard and keep what they earn. But every time we deny the fact that we do have a crisis at the border, every time that we allow for lawlessness to take place at the border, we end up creating an environment where drug cartels, where other criminal organizations are allowed to not only harm American citizens, but also to exploit people that are trying to cross. And so what we're looking for here is very, very common sense. We want a merit-based approach, which allows people to come, which gives priority to people that come to the United States because they want to be a part of the American experiment. And we also prevent and are able to help thwart those criminal organizations that, again, not only harm U.S. citizens, but exploit people that want to come to the United States. And without proper border security, and like you said, it's not just about technology, it's about actually giving our Border Patrol the equipment they need to include a wall in order to prevent that from taking place, in order to prevent that exploitation from taking place. Every time Democrats obstruct that, they're not just hurting American citizens, they're also hurting potential immigrants. Not to mention the fact that it is just wildly unfair and makes absolutely no sense when we tell hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people all over the world who are patiently waiting in line to come to this country legally, that they're going to be a second priority. They're going to take second place to people that are crossing the border illegally. So I think this is absolutely necessary. I think it's been demonstrated that it works when it's done correctly and when it's done intelligently. And so, again, I applaud the people that are again, donating their own land, donating their own funds in order to make this happen. And again, it's not just a process. The wall is not just about ensuring that U.S. laws are enforced. It's also about ensuring that we don't create a humanitarian crisis at the border, and we create vulnerable people that can be easily exploited by drug cartels.
You know, Nick Freitas, one of the things that really struck me since I've been here for a day and a half, and looking at this wall and touching it and feeling it, and of course seeing the Mexicans on the other side of it, or seeing whoever's on the other side that are not in the U.S., and seeing the Mexican military with fatigues walking around. One thing that struck me is when I hear the Democrats talking about technology and really walls are outdated and you need technology and drones and surveillance. It all sounds great in a soundbite, but Delegate Freitas, when you come here, and you actually see it with your own eyes, right? And you talk to the Border Patrol agents, and there's no politics and there's no hype. There's no way you can do this without a wall. I don't care what surveillance you have. You can have electronic surveillance for 3,000 miles and 1 billion drones. The only way you're going to stop people from coming in is with a wall, and they've done it. Because the Border Patrol agents I talked to said that crossings in this 2-mile stretch have gone down to zero. Zero. Like not one. So I don't know, when they say, well, we can do that with technology, walls are medieval, until you come here and see it, how are they going to keep people out without some kind of a barrier?
Well, John, I was down at the border not that long ago with a group, and the whole purpose was to talk to people that were actually living on the border. And here's what we found. Most of the people that we were talking to were mothers. Most of them were they were either first-generation immigrants, they were second- or third-generation immigrants. They had no animosity toward immigrants whatsoever. What they were concerned about, and rightfully so, was the fact that we have elementary schools right on the border. And they were concerned because multiple times a year those schools would go on lockdown because somebody was actually crossing over the border. And then when parents would come to pick up their kids, they would actually get in with that, and they would have their friends come and pick them up as well in order to drive them inland in the United States. And so this whole idea that a physical border doesn't make any sense, or to have some sort of a wall at the border doesn't make any sense, is ridiculous. And let's face it, it's coming from a bunch of people that many of them live in gated communities. When we have military bases, we have walls around sensitive sites. So we understand that a physical barrier does work. Now, it doesn't mean that it stops everybody from coming over, but what it does is it channelizes people, because typically people will take the path of least resistance. And if they can simply cross over, well, then sure, why not do that? But if you have some sort of structure there, if you have a wall there that makes it more difficult to do that, it actually allows Border Patrol to more easily allocate resources, and it's an efficiency measure as much as it is an obstruction to people breaking the law. So, again, this is something that people are saying who, again, especially these people from Hollywood who live in gated communities, suggesting that a wall doesn't work is ridiculous. And they prove that it's ridiculous by their own actions and the way they live their lives. So I think that nobody has ever suggested that a wall is the only solution down there. We understand that there's a legal component with respect to what our immigration laws actually look like. There's a technological component with respect to drones and surveillance. But no, a physical barrier absolutely has a positive effect at the border. And look, I don't think any of us wish it was necessary. We would love to live in a place where our borders were actually respected, and we would love it if people coming to the country would just follow the legal processes for doing so. America is incredibly generous with the amount of immigrants that we allow come into the country every year because we realize the positive effects of immigration. But it has to be done in a legal way, and a wall is a part of that. A physical barrier is a part of that. Again, we would all love it if it wasn't necessary, but unfortunately, because of the actions of drug cartels, of criminal organizations, and quite frankly, I think some of the blame lies at the feet of these people on the left who are actively encouraging, and here's the point, John, they're actively encouraging people to come to this country illegally because they benefit politically from a crisis. Right? The Democrats have set themselves up to not benefit from actually coming up with an equitable solution to all of this. They have benefited themselves politically by the crisis. And so they really don't have much of an incentive to fix it. They don't have much of an incentive to actually sit down with the president and actually come up with some compromises that work. They just intransigently sit there and claim that it doesn't work despite all the evidence to the contrary. And again, that's not good for American citizens. It's not good for people that want to come here legally. And ultimately, it's not even good for people that are trying to essentially cheat the system because they are the ones most easily exploited by these criminal organizations south of the border.
Let me turn my mic on here, Nick. I had to turn it off because one of the bulldozers, they're still under construction here, went by. We're with Nick Freitas, House of Delegates member from Culpeper, Republican, Central Virginia. Nick, I want you to elaborate a little bit. We're live in Sunland Park, New Mexico, at the border wall, privately funded, webuildawall.us. You can go there. I want you to elaborate on where you say the Democrats have a vested interest in to keep this crisis going and not solving it. What is their vested interest?
Well, I think what they've done, and we were dealing with this actually in Culpeper not that long ago with when our sheriff decided to participate with the 287G program, which was simply a program where he can actually get deputies in Culpeper the training they need to be able to coordinate with ICE when someone has actually been arrested. So we're not talking about going out and searching, to determine whether or not someone is here legally. We're saying that when someone gets arrested and comes into our prison system or comes into our jails, just the common sense coordination with ICE to be able to say, look, you broke the law to come here, and then since you've been here, you've additionally broken the law, and now we need to come up with a mechanism and a process to be able to get you out so you're not hurting American citizens anymore. They all oppose that. And then they come in and they say that anytime we talk about immigration, they claim that we're being racist or xenophobic. And again, it's a false narrative, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to sow fear among immigrant populations that Republicans hate them or Republicans don't want them here. That's not the case at all. We just want people to come here legally because it is a safe mechanism for them to be able to come here, and it's a way that they can be able to integrate into, again, American society in a way that they can be productive, a way that they can be independent, that they can become citizens. That's all we want. But again, every time they sow fear, every time they accuse everyday Americans who realize that this is a problem of being racist or xenophobic, they're creating this environment to where they want immigrant populations to be fearful, not because Republicans or American law enforcement are out to get them, but because they think it helps their overall political narrative. And it's not only frustrating, John, it's incredibly offensive. Again, to tell American citizens that there's something wrong with them if they want people to follow basic common sense immigration laws. And we're not talking about unique immigration laws, John. Every other country out there. Go look at the immigration laws on the books in Mexico. They're far more draconian than anything we have in the United States. Go look at immigration laws in countries in Europe. All we're asking for is again, those same common sense approaches that create an environment where when someone wants to immigrate to the United States, we can ensure that they're going to be successful when they get here, that they're not going to have to immediately go on to welfare programs. But I think that's what the Democrats want. The Democrats are quite frankly, have set themselves up to be the party of dependency. And when people come to the country illegally, they're far more likely to need public assistance in some way, shape, or form. They get illegal documentation in order to be able to exploit those different welfare programs that we've set up for American citizens, whether they were born here or whether they immigrated here. And it's just wrong. It doesn't make sense. It's not fair. But the media just constantly reinforces this narrative coming from the left that if you have any sort of inclination to protect our borders, that somehow that makes you a bigoted or racist or xenophobic person. And I think the American people are tired of it. I think they see right through the Democrat narrative, but I don't think there's any question. And this latest crisis that we have on the border with some of the detention centers just illustrates that. Nobody cared what was going on down there when Barack Obama was president. Now that Trump's president, all of a sudden they want to shine a light on some things. And again, we're not saying they're not problems, but every time the president tries to actually address those problems, the Democrats obstruct him. So at what point do I stop coming to the conclusion that, okay, they have good intentions, we have good intentions, we have just have different policy objectives? And what point do I come to the very logical conclusion that no, they have set themselves up to benefit politically from a problem at the border, and therefore they have no incentive to fix it whatsoever? And I think we're at that point. When I can start to see Democrats stepping forward in goodwill and acknowledging that there is a problem, acknowledging that the United States, just like every other sovereign nation, has a right to be able to successfully enforce their immigration laws, then I'll believe that they're serious about actually helping us fix this problem. But until then, I'm going to go with the evidence before me, and the evidence is very clear that Democrats think that as long as there's a crisis, they can exploit that for their own political advantage. And there's one other point I want to bring up here, John. You see this a lot as well when Democrats fight tooth and nail to keep a very, very common sense question off of our census, which is, are you an American citizen? Because the way that we're supposed to apportion representation in this country is based off of actual American citizens, not just who happens to be in the district at the time. And once again, Democrats think that if we're just counting heads as opposed to counting American citizens in our census, they'll be able to get larger representation in Congress. So again, on all levels, whether it's electoral, whether it's political, they have set themselves up to benefit from a crisis, and that is very, very dangerous for our people. And again, it's dangerous for immigrants.
Nick Freitas, that's going to be the final word, except I got to ask you, when do they make the decision if you're on the ballot or not?
We're not sure at that point. Again, we've gone through a perfectly appropriate process. We've filled out all the paperwork, and so this should be a foregone conclusion at this point. But we'll probably get official word from State Board of Elections either possibly today or maybe early next week.
Nick Freitas, thanks for being with us, and also thank you for Nick Freitas for being a sponsor of the John Fredericks Radio Network live here at Symposium at the Wall in Sunland Park, New Mexico. Sunland Park, New Mexico. Symposium at the Wall, right outside of El Paso, Texas. WeBuildTheWall.us. WeBuildTheWall.us. Nick Freitas, thanks for being with us. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Here you're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network.